Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to JRays and welcome to another Raid Shadow Legends video. And in today's video, I want to take some time to reflect and kind of showcase the results from the last live arena season, which ended maybe about like a week ago. Regardless, I was actually able to place 51st overall in the live arena season, which put me in the top 100 bracket. And so in this screenshot here, you can see that I placed at rank 51 with an overall rating or points of 1,765 with a 66% win rate over 525 battles. And taking into account the it's like 28 29 resets in a season, which averages roughly out to, I think by my calculations, 18.5 battles a day. So I was buying on average 2 refreshes every day, and yeah, it was fun, honestly. And I want to take some time to kind of reflect, show just my account, my champions, the gears, talk a little bit about anything and everything really live arena focused, and kind of share my experiences from there. I think something to kind of keep in mind as this video kind of goes on, and this is definitely something that I came up in a lot of the feedback that I received in the post that I made on Reddit, but it's really all about perspective in terms of the level of play. I would say like top 100 is so far above, I think, what most people might even think about, and that kind of puts a limit on the perspective of like people not knowing really the kind of champions, the kind of accounts that a lot of people at this rank are playing. And so with that perspective, I would say that the champion pool that I'm about to show you, the gear, the whatnot, I think overall is fairly tame and even average, I would say, at this level of play. But real quick, I'll also just flash the rewards for you guys as well, what a top 100 chest looks like. And this was honestly one of the biggest reasons why I tried to go for this push. In some of the past seasons, I was able to get the top 500 chest fairly easily, but going for the top 100 was definitely a pretty significant push. Now, one of the biggest differences, just you get an entire extra sacred shard, you get another primal shard, I think you get another void shard, maybe you don't get another void shard, and then I got a mythic book on top of that, as well as a cool frame. And then just one more thing, you get a cool little spiffy top 100 badge as well. So honestly, I think for what it is, the rewards for placing in the top 100 is actually fairly good. And if you can do that, then I think, of course, you should try, right? So I want to talk through my champion pool. I'll flash through each and every one of them, their gears, stats, and whatnot, and I'll kind of go from there. But overall, I have 15 champions that I would say are arena equipped and part of my overall roster and pool of champions that I might choose. And so as you can see over the champions, we have Embrius, Galathyr, Carnage, Crixia, Neve, Marius, Sifi, Maria, Rhodos, Fabian, Solenar, Queen of Hearts, Aelil, Donatello, and Mavara. Now, within these 15 champions, there are definitely some that got picked way more than others. 3 champions out of this pool that I pretty much almost never picked this season, unfortunately, included Embrius as one of them when I got his 5-star soul, and now I don't really use him. Sifi was also a champion that I just didn't use, and then Rhodos unfortunately didn't really find much play either. Now, within the other 12 champions, again, I think there were some champions that stood out more, that I played more and whatnot. And I'll try to cover that in as much detail as possible. Now, just a few call outs that I think some people might find surprising is, as the season progressed, I honestly even used champions like Star Sage and Crixia less than some of the other champions in the pool. For example, Fabian was a champion that I was prioritizing a lot more over Crixia, for example. And then even someone like Mavara, which was a champion that really stood out to me this season, and someone who I rated fairly poorly initially during her fusion. That's why I don't have her 5-star soul. But I began picking Mavara a lot more over Galathier as well, because one, she has a great speed aura with 28% in all battles, and her passive being able to grant extra turn meter is just so valuable. And so even amongst this row of champions, like my mythicals, Star Sage Galathier and Crixia were being used a bit less than their legendary counterparts. Galathier still served a nice purpose, and I think against like specifically Predator, that was definitely a champion sort of matchup that I like to favor. But yeah, I'll just quickly pop up some of the stats here for you guys, and we can kind of go from there. I'll start with my nukers. I built out this nice little table just for you guys to kind of see. But these were the nukers that I have separated out. And of course, champions like Embrius and Rhodos down here were champions that I didn't use that much. This is just ranked in speed. So this is just descending in speed. And then I can try to lay on about how frequently I might have picked these champions as well. So I think the standout one is Marius. Now Marius is a little bit of a, it's like you really need Stormcaller to enable what I would consider one of the most overpowered combinations in live arena. Because he's just so good at stripping Mercurial, he lands the stuns, and he's just a pain in the butt to deal with, right? Now, unfortunately, I not only don't have Stormcaller, I have a Cascades instead, I also don't have a very good 9-piece Mercurial set. On top of that, his speed is fairly slow with 331 speed, where I've seen just 9-piece Mercurial Marius is at like 400 speed and whatnot. And so while I think for the matches that he was played in, he did pretty well, it's a very sort of middle of the pack build where he's not super fast, he doesn't have Stormcaller, and he doesn't have the protection from Mercurial. I was using him a lot less than what you might see in live arena based off of the general agreeance that if you have a Stormcaller and Marius, you might see him as like a first pick champion. So unfortunately for me, my use of Marius was fairly limited. I would say I'd only pick him if the opponent picked away another one of my champions. For example, if my opponent picked Solenar or Sanguine Maria, then I might have to pick Marius because he's kind of just the next best champion on my list. So honestly, maybe use Marius in like 20% of my matches overall as far as nukers go. I will say that he was a very good pick against, of course, Bayek. It's very rare to see matches where your opponent picks Bayek without picking Marius, but if that was the case, then it's obviously very good for me to pick Marius because my accuracy is actually quite nice on him with 541. That's probably fairly high comparative to how most Mariuses are built, but at the cost of having some speed, right? Now, as for my two most commonly used champions, I would say it would be Sanguine Maria as well as Solenar. So Sanguine Maria over here is in a 9-piece Mercurial set, and she has a 6-star blessing here. Her stats are fairly nice. I think what I was trying to do is index a lot on speed. So this is probably pretty fast as in terms of having a Mercurial set for me on a nuker. Her attack isn't super high and she has fairly fine crit damage, but being able to go fast is really important. Because she is in Mercurial, right? And then if she gets a turn, she can kind of chain off her turns. Now, the reason why this build works for me and just the fact that her attack stats, damage stats aren't super high is because she does have the ability to essentially ignore 99% of a target's defense. So even amongst the tankiest members out there, she can get through fairly well. Now, another thing that you might notice is my accuracy is also fairly high. She has about almost 400 accuracy. And even though this isn't really enough to potentially crit over teams that have Bayek, part of her kit that still makes her very, very flexible is the fact that she can just have an AoE strip built in. So it's actually still fairly important to have a decent amount of accuracy. Now, what I want to say about Maria is she was really is the sort of enabling champion in my roster that I think really helped me to have a lot of success within live arena. If you guys seen any of the past, actually, yeah, if you guys have seen any of my past live arena videos, or you guys have just seen other content creators slash players use Sanguine Maria in the arena, you know of her potential. But the ability to just kind of cycle turns, go from A3 into A1, and then on the third turn go into A2, kill an enemy through stone skin or block damage, and then increase the cooldown of all the enemy's skills. It is super, super powerful. Now, one thing that I do want to call out that I think is interesting in terms of Sanguine Maria is that I have a perched shadow relic on her, which gives her an extra chance of receiving extra turn when using your default skill and if an active skill is on cooldown. So this essentially gives me an additional 18% chance to receive an extra turn when using the A1 on top of the 33% chance for attacking on each of the 3 hits, right? And this is very good because it allows me to start off with A3 and then gives me an extra turn. I go into the A1. This has a 33% chance extra turn for each of the 3 hits, and then at the end of it there's another 18% chance to gain an extra turn if the 3 turns or the 3 attacks didn't net me an extra turn. So this just gave me a lot of consistency going from A3 into A1 and then finally into the A2. And so if at a start of a game or start of a fight my Maria gets to go A3, A1, A2, kill a unit, lock out my opponents, that often just help me to win the fights kind of straight off the bat. And this ability is just so good against Nice as well, being able to just hit super hard and go through block damage. So Maria definitely enabled me a lot in terms of being able to blast through a lot of tough teams when something like my Solenar was kind of taken out, right? And so Maria for me is my complete standout in terms of champion in live arena. If I didn't have Maria and I didn't have her 6-starred, I think this would be incredibly difficult to have achieved, even if I did have Solenar. And of course, I still want to call Solenar because he is still a complete beast in terms of the arena, just the amount of damage he deals, the nuisance that he is overall, as long as he isn't locked out, and just his ability to kind of just beat people up, really. So there's nothing really to call out there. With Solenar, the one thing that he is built slow and he is indexed on damage. So again, the trade-off with speed versus damage, right? Now in Maria's case, I want her to be fast. Solenar, I want to be slow, and this is mainly just against Predator. One of the weaknesses of Solenar is the fact that if he outruns his stone skin, he can become very susceptible to dying. So Solenar was pretty much one of my slowest champions or the slowest nuker that I have on my account. And provided that he can like last out his stone skin, and then of course paired with the block damage from Neve, he becomes very difficult to kill. So that's kind of the reasoning there. From the other nukers, let's see, anything else to call out. So Sanguine Maria and Solenar were, I would say, my most used nukers. I probably could pick the pair of them in at least, 60% of all matches, like having both of them there. And then across like, at least like 90% of all my matches, I'd probably pick at least one of them. And so they're just super flexible in terms of being able to kind of slot into anything. But of course, I was probably planning my teams around these 2 champions as well. Anything else to call out here? I think Embrius is kind of an interesting champion. I think he's really good. He's like insanely good right now. In being able to strip off Mercurial and of course place the really annoying debuffs. But I just underutilized him, I think, and I need to figure out how I can utilize him more. I think the reason why it's a little bit awkward for me is I don't think he pairs fairly well with either my Maria or my Solenar, because ideally he has somebody to go before him in order to strip off the Mercurial so he can land the debuffs, right? So often not, you don't want your Carnage to be your fastest nuker because you'd be hitting into Mercurial, so pairing him with Solenar doesn't make a ton of sense. And then Maria can kind of pop up on her own, or Maria is just more so single target, right? With Carnage, you really want that AoE buff strip, AoE Mercurial strip, so that you can have the chance of spreading the debuffs across the board. And so because I used Marius a lot less, I was finding it hard to pick Carnage in my matches. And so I'd probably say I didn't use Carnage all that much either in terms of the fights. I think it's some area that I try to explore a little bit more of how I can include Carnage a little bit more, because I do think he's really good. Once I get a 6-star soul, hopefully I'll start to find areas where he can shine and just think about how I want to draft things. I don't think there's anything else super interesting to kind of cover there, so I will go over my supports as well. I think the most important part is just how powerful Fabian is, and that's the reason why I ended up giving him the most speed. And the reason why I began choosing Fabian more than Crixia, even though I would say that most people would imagine Crixia as a potential upgrade in terms of, not only being able to lock out, but also refresh your skills. I found that a lot of times in my matches, even if I pick Crixie against Fabian, most of the times I'm not going to leave the Fabian up, because that could be a little bit risky if they ban my Crixia and all of a sudden I don't have a way to cleanse, right? And so a lot of times, even if I picked Crixia into Fabian, both champions would just get banned either way, right? Or if I was going into the fight, I'd still probably want to ban the Fabian, which kind of takes away a lot of the power of lockout champions. Like, if you relegate Crixie to only refreshing your skills, someone like Donatello is probably just a straight up upgrade. And so that's one reason why I started picking Fabian over Crixia more. Another reason, of course, is my 6-star soul for Fabian, and so it's just a lot easier for me to build him at a fast enough speed. So 427 speed isn't the fastest Fabian out there, but for my purposes, he honestly worked fairly well, as long as there wasn't like a speed booster on the opposite side. And then for the most part, speed boosters are just not really something that you see a lot in Live Arena, at least at higher levels. And I think there's a lot of areas where Fabian does outshine against Crixia. So for one, he has the annoying passive that places the true fear when someone gets revived, right? This is really valuable against, of course, revivers, people like the Theodosias of the world and whatnot, right? But his A2 being able to petrify and then, of course, or spread or place true fears across the board is also very useful as well, being able to kind of hit champions through like block damage, for example, and then remove that. But also another really important target for this specific interaction is against Krutraxa. A lot of times Krutraxa isn't in a protective set because a lot of people want her to die so that she comes back to life and does her A1, right? So oftentimes, even if I had Fabian and Krutraxa, I could petrify her and then she would lose her block, or she would lose her revive on death, right? That's how petrify works. So that was another reason why Fabian was just so much better. Of course, Fabian also has a speed aura, which is helpful as well. But yeah, that's one of the reasons why I just gravitate towards picking Fabian a lot over Crixia. And then one more thing again, right? Because in Live Arena, any champion you pick means that your opponent can't pick him, provided you are in gold or higher. And it's just more people have Fabian, less people have Crixia, right? So the more often you pick Fabian away, there's less like champions, there's less lockout champions that your opponent can pick. Another thing that I do want to call out is coming to the relic. So Temporal Stagnator is a really awesome relic. It's in the CVC relic pool, and essentially it can lock out on weak hits. This is something that is really, really valuable because it gives you additional consistency in linear lockouts, and it becomes fairly consistent at a 50% chance at level 6, 40% at level 5 of locking out on a weak hit. Of course, this is good against affinity, but this is also really, really valuable against one of the newest Void legendary champions, Tecton, who places Poison Cloud on himself at the start of a round. And so having Fabian to be able to lock Tecton out, even if he weak hits, because Poison Cloud converts all hits into weak hits, is incredibly valuable, because this guy, there's really not many ways of dealing with him very easily if you aren't able to lock him out. So that's to say that I just think that someone like Fabian is just so much more valuable right now than for me than Crixia, because I'm unable to build Crixia fast enough, or if I was able to fight for speed in like a lockout fight, I'd probably lose it the majority of the time, because again, I'm just not very fast. Anything else? Let's see. Just call outs in terms of like what really helped me out. I would say that I kind of touched up on this a little bit earlier, but Mavara was of course a standout choice for me in terms of my roster. Being able to have the passive that does increase turn meter, but also just her kit is really nice. I think I've come to realize that. So the HP balance, while it doesn't count as a heal, this also means that it kind of isn't able to be stopped by Solenar. And it's the same with like Theodosia passive, where you can bring the HP of your allies up even through someone like Solenar. So this is a very valuable sort of interaction within the arena, where you can essentially quote unquote heal your allies without, you know, getting it stolen by an opponent Solenar. So this is one thing that was really valuable. Now her A3 is also quite interesting, where she places unkillable only on herself, but she gives a veil to everybody. And this is really good into like a lot of the single target champions that is out there, right? We have like Predator outside of his AoE. We have like Kruchaxa, right? Kruchaxa just importantly cannot deal with an unkillable, especially when Veil is kind of placed out, right? So there's actually a few good instances where this can actually be very, very powerful, even if you aren't using it for the revive, because of the perfect Veil and putting the killable on her. Another thing that I found her very useful was just being able to have somebody that I would want to put Volcardiac Heart onto. This is something I'm still working on, but I'm trying to build more resistance on my Mavara. I'll get a good chunk once I get the 5-star, and then if I ever get a resistance banner, that's going to be another big chunk. But I'm slowly working to build resistance on Mavara, because she is able to also then place increased resistance on top, right? Which makes her very, very tanky in that aspect of not being able to get debuffed. And so something like Volcardiac Heart is kind of a good choice on her, because it gives her a ton of resistance. And what's good about Volcardiac Heart is it gives me the Magma Shield buff, which hilariously enough is actually really good into Kruchaxa. That's kind of just a very, very minute tip. But the importance of Magma Shield for me is I have a champion like Maria, where I need to manage buffs. And so being able to have another way of providing buffs and being able to get Maria to that threshold of 3 or 6 buffs is very important, right? Maria has 1 buff from Mercurial, she has 2 buffs from Ward of the Fallen, and then she has a 3rd buff from Volcardiac Heart, right? And so this is one of the ways that I paired my champions up to get to 3. And then if I wanted to like A2 with the Mavara, and then I had like the block damage from Neve, that would get me to 6 buffs, right? For example. And so this paired not only with the Neve, but it also paired very well with the Aelil, right? It's kind of like another way of boosting up my Aelil in terms of getting him that extra turn meter to help him to cut in first. I know I'm kind of talking about champions as if everyone knew what they did, so bear with me, and then if you guys have any questions, feel free to follow up down below. But having a champion that I felt like was powerful enough and fitting of having Volcardiac Heart is pretty important for enabling some of the champions in my roster. Donatello is a fairly new addition, but I think most people have seen him and just being able to reset with having Chronophage, so nothing much to talk about there. I'm still figuring out how to draft him more. I think this is something that I picked up in the last week of the season, because I kind of shifted some of my Mercurial gear around, but still trying to explore how to utilize him more. I think the 2 support champions that stood out the most to me were Neve as well as Queen of Hearts in terms of their overall utility and just power level in helping me to secure more wins. Neve, I don't think needs too much explanation, but the ability to place block damage at the start of a round made her very, very good into a wide range of champions. Of course, she has the big heal, she has the reset, and then she has fairly good debuffs. Like the decreased crit rate is honestly quite underrated in terms of arena. Of course, it's hard to not only place debuffs but also have champions that actually place this debuff as well, but overall her kit's very, very useful. Later on in the season, I swapped her to Aspect of Seroth. Originally I had Wand on her, and while it sucks a little bit that it can't reflect stuns off of Stormcaller, I think I just found how valuable just having Aspect of Seroth was, because there were a good amount of single target champions that do ignore block damage, or just ignore block damage overall is just so common out there. Champions like Nice, for example, right? Or against like Predator, who can ignore the block damage if there isn't block debuffs up, but then will still get damage reduced by the Aspect of Seroth, right? So for a lot of people who try to counter Neve by bringing in champions that would be able to hit through block damage, Aspect of Seroth was a fairly reliable answer to kind of try to stop that. And then Queen of Hearts is another fantastic 9-piece Mercurial holder because her passive does allow her to get extra turns. But what makes Queen of Hearts so powerful right now is kind of two things, right? Ally attacks are very underrated in terms of live arena and just arena in general, because you are able to bring in allies to help you destroy Mercurial stacks off turn, right? So you can go in with Queen of Hearts, you bring in a couple allies, destroy a bunch of total guard stacks, and then your nukers get to go without having to hit through the total guard stacks themselves, right? So that's something that's really, really valuable. But honestly, there aren't really a ton of arena meta champions that do have ally attacks. Queen of Hearts is, I think, one of the rare ones. There are still some really good champions out there that do have similar abilities, such as Pauldrig. I think another fantastic and underrated champion out there with his ally attack. And then maybe there's like Mikage, and then some other niche ones, such as like people who join in attacks, for example. Mavara does count as one of them, but it's not something that you can really consistently rely on unless you did have some other way of more reliably placing fervor. And then people like Geralt, right, who can kind of join in on attacks. But overall, that's kind of that. And then the second part is this death brand, which honestly was less valuable overall than it probably should have been, especially like pre-Mercurial. But now that you see more like Crutraxis, who are built fairly slow, this is another way of me to counter Crutraxis, because I don't really have many champions in my roster that are able to place block revive. And then one more thing is just being able to bring in increased attack. I don't have any champions that do that otherwise, and I do rely on a plethora of attack-based damage dealers. So being able to place increased attack, right, is very, very valuable in pumping up their damage. So that's just my champion roster overall. I try to give a little bit of context into how I use them, how frequently I use them. I guess in terms of support, Neve was probably my most used champion, maybe in like at least 80% of my matches. There were matches where I felt like I didn't need her, or the champions that my opponent brought just so happened to have very good ways of fighting block damage, like into Crutraxa or Nice or like Gizmak, right? Champions that can and will go through block damage. I felt like there wasn't a ton of value in picking Neve. So in that aspect, there were matchups where I didn't need to bring Neve. And so in those instances, of course, I didn't draft her. Queen of Hearts was somebody that I probably underutilized a lot in the earlier parts of it, but as I progressed through the season, I found her just be so much more helpful and useful. So she probably showed up at least like 40% of the time. I'll talk a little bit about Alo as well, but Alo was really my main counter strategy against opponent Fabians. The thing about Alo is he's super weak into Mercurial, because the the kind of wow factor of Alo, and if you guys seen my video on him, is the ability for him to run super fast and then to one-shot somebody, gain stone skin, and then get to second turn, right? But if everyone is in Mercurial, he kind of just sits there and does nothing because he only has single hits, right? So he was mainly out there to essentially one-shot Fabians at the start of the round. Now, one thing that's really interesting is that champions like Fabian or Crixia, lockout champions, are really built for speed nowadays, and there's not much room to put them into Mercurial because you're going to be sacrificing a lot of speed for that. And oftentimes you just don't see Fabians in Mercurial as a result of that. And so if I was able to pick up Alo, I would be fairly consistent at being to kill the opponent's Fabian, and this gave me a little bit more flexibility overall in terms of my draft. So he was definitely a much more niche pick. I tried to make sure that the opponent didn't have many tanky champions or like revivers. Like if someone had a Galather and a Fabian, all of a sudden it makes Alo just a lot less tempting, unless I wanted to ban opponent's Galather, which generally speaking, banning revivers is kind of something you don't want to do because they're kind of just there to exist. But that is sort of my roster. I've tried to point out as many fun tidbits and interesting things as I can. And I think one thing that I want to address is just the blessings overall. And I have received comments that, you know, blessings, I have a lot of cool blessings, right? High blessings, 6-star, 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 5-star, 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 4-star, 3-star, 2-star, whatever. And most of these are honestly like free, quote unquote, or like obtainable. Like, of course, I don't use Embrace anymore, but 5-star Embrace Soul was available through that one path. I got lucky, pulled a 5-star Galather Soul, but I'm unlucky and I only have a 1-star Crixia Soul, right? That's just how Mythic Souls work. 5 stars on Carnage, you know, you have to collect these yourselves. I guess you could pull them, but you know, you'd get 6-star at some point. Now for this 6-star soul, this 6-star soul, this 6-star soul, and this 6-star soul, I bought these through the Altar of Souls, through the Soul Merchant, right? This is like this part of free to play that no one tells you or no one shows you because it's grueling, arduous, it takes forever, and all that changes is this one red star, right? Of course you get a ton of speed, but like I bought this 4-star soul, or I bought these 4 champions, the 6-star souls of. I got lucky, I pulled a 6-star Rhodos. I got lucky, I pulled a 6-star Sanguine Maria. I forgot if I bought this, but these are just like small pity souls, right? I might have bought the 5-star Queen of Hearts, and then I missed out on this, right? But for example, like Solenar, right? Solenar 5-star Soul was available through that one event. You know, Fabian 5-star Soul was available through his hero path. I bought the 6-star Soul afterwards. But a lot of souls are really just bought, and it takes forever because, you know, getting the red essence takes forever. But there's really not that much luck involved in the kind of souls that I have for my account, I would say. And then another thing for relics, right? I do have a good amount of hilts across the board. I have 4 hilts and a 5th one kind of chilling, and then I have 2 hearts and a 1 kind of chilling, right? So I have 5 mythic relics that I have on my supports, and then I have a death dealer on my Carnage, which is kind of fun and nice, right? Here, right. So I only have 6 mythical relics that I use on my champions, and I know there is a huge amount of variance in terms of obtaining mythical relics, but I would say relative to amount of pulls I've actually had, I'd probably be like sub, I don't know if I'm like on rate or like under, but I'm definitely not above rate in any super high capacity. And so in terms of like my gear, and again, I'll kind of flash the stats, the gear sets and whatnot. For the level, I know for the majority of players out there, this is pretty high, and you know, in terms of speed, most people are probably somewhere in the 200s, for example, across the board on their nukers, and maybe like, I don't know, slower overall in terms of speed. But I want to give that level of perspective for the level of play that this was at rank 51, top 100 live arena out of everybody, right? The champ pool, the gear, you know, I don't have any faction guardians. That's another big thing, right? I don't have any legendary faction guardians filled out. So that like was a big hit to the overall stats that I have. I don't have any empowerments. I barely I have one level 18 like relic, right? And so it really was a surprise to me that this was something that was achievable for me because I have a much limited champion pool. My gear is, I would say, not, my stats aren't the greatest. My gear is quite good, but my stats aren't the greatest, right? I don't have 6-star souls on everybody. I don't have faction guardians. I don't have empowerments. And you know, I don't have the best of the best. There really is, right? But I was still able to make it work through just, I think, a smart understanding of my own draft. Yes, I have some very powerful Void champions that I'm super lucky to get, but there's a ton of other Void champions out there that I don't have that are very good, right? Kutraxa, Bayek, Tecton, Hecaton, so on and so forth, right? So for me, this was a very nice experience that I was actually able to achieve this. And I think that for anyone out there who is, you know, trying to take something away from this, I think that there is some level of prioritization in terms of what you find important, but it's really coming down to understanding your team, your draft, and a lot of other micro things like your gameplay and decisions overall that really bring you from here up to here. And while that isn't really easily communicated through a video like this, it's really just more about playing the game and being able to figure that stuff out for yourself. I didn't get really much time to talk about just drafting and things like that. Maybe I'll cover that in a future video if that's something of value or something you guys want. But I'm going to wrap things up for here. Hope you guys found this tidbit a little bit interesting and just talking through some of my champions out there and what I found useful to me and things like that. Let me guys know if how your live arena video or video seasons went. I'd be happy to hear from you guys, and let me guys know if you guys have any areas that you'd love to ask me about. I'll try to be open and answer whatever you guys come up with. But I love you guys so much, and I'll catch you guys with the next one. Peace out, guys, and take care.